one is an island. But everyone likes to visit one. In Jersey, you're only ever 10 minutes from a beach, or a historical monument, or even this. And if that's not enough, our island doubles in size when the tide is out. So you get twice as much to enjoy. Jersey, where sea meets soul. Come and pay us a visit at jersey.com.
Jersey's annual air display is the island's biggest event, and it's well known among airshow enthusiasts for hosting rarely seen aircraft that don't normally participate in airshows on the UK mainland. 2025 should be the Jersey air display at its best. The world's only airworthy example of the Bréguet Alizé and the last active Junkers 52 are scheduled to be among the flying display participants. And the Dutch-based replica CA-13 Boomerang will be making a rare British Isles appearance. After seeing A3A's turbo Firecat in Jersey last year, this time MEAC is sending their example to the show for the first time. Also a star participant, RAF Station Czechoslovakia's Anson Mark I, the only Mark I Anson flying in the world, which arrived in Europe from New Zealand just a few months ago. All these rarities star alongside familiar airshow favourites like the Red Arrows, Typhoon and Jet Pits. A very good afternoon and the warmest of welcomes to Plains TV's live coverage of the Jersey International Air Display 2025. Always one of our favourite events that we cover pretty much every year, not least because of the astonishing variety of very rare aircraft that so typically appear in the flying display here. Now, there have been a few changes to the flying display running order, and unfortunately one of the aircraft that you did see featured quite prominently in that opening sequence, the Bréguet Alizé, is not going to be with us. There have been a few more adjustments to the programme over the last 24 hours or so, mostly weather related, because we had a day of really torrid weather conditions both here in Jersey and in the south of England yesterday. The outlook here in Jersey this afternoon, though, is looking really quite good. It is windy, but the wind is right down the runway at the airport, and the sun is out, and should be out most of the time, we think. The flying display we are expecting will begin at 17 minutes past 2 local time, and it will start with the North American OV-10B Bronco and then the Turbo Firecat, both coming from the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse at Montélimar. Then we have Navy Wings with the Harvard Mark IV, Rich Goodwin in his jet pits, albeit probably flying without jets today. We have Plain Sailing's gorgeous PBY-5A Catalina, Isabel Rutland in the P-51D Mustang. We have the Anson Mark I from RAF Station Czechoslovakia, and then we have a pair of very rare warbirds based in continental Europe in the form of the Yak-3 UPW and the CA-13 Boomerang, and that really is an example of Jersey going out of the way to attract some aeroplanes that we very rarely see in flying displays on the British mainland. Another example of that coming up thereafter with the Junkers U-52 from the Amical Jean-Baptiste Salis. Then we have the two big hitters from the Royal Air Force, the Typhoon FGR-4 and the Red Arrows, closing the show at 4:30. It is a little while until the flying display begins, though, so as we show you some of the scenes of St Albans Bay here in Jersey, we're also going to dip into the Plains TV archive and bring you some clips of programmes that we have released over the last few weeks on our streaming service. And the most recent release over on our streaming service is our highlights programme from Antidotum Airshow Leszno earlier this year. Here's a look at that. In the airshow world, certain places are hallowed ground, and this, I humbly submit, should be one of them. a really tremendous show, and we have a more than 2-hour highlights programme on our streaming service, which includes some of the fantastic drone filming that you were seeing in that little promotional video. And we can show you a little bit more of that programme to give you an idea both of how imaginative the Antidotum Airshow is, and also to give you a taste of that incredible drone filming. This is a clip of a First World War reenactment group based in the Czech Republic called Pterodactyl Flight, and they were really quite eye-catching, as you'll see. The tail end of the First World War, we are no longer in Leszno, but at a German airfield on the Western Front. And I did say that the Fokker E3 would be vulnerable. It does appear to have taken damage from the SE-5. Pilot working hard to keep that aircraft in the air and try and make it back to base for some kind of emergency landing. Meanwhile, the SE-5 itself has now come under attack, with a Fokker DR-1 hounding it through the sky. Well, the Fokker E3 is back on the ground, but there's a swirling melee of aircraft above our heads. Meanwhile, the SE-5 is diving in once again to attack the German base. And that Fokker E3 on the ground is not going anywhere anytime soon. A very successful attack from the SE-5 there, which is now being harried by the Fokker D7. A very dynamic reenactment, as you can see, and that is one of 3 programmes that we've released over on watch.planestv.com in the last few weeks. Another one covered one of the biggest military air shows of the year, IRA 25, over in Spain. That was held in June, 1 week before the Antidotum Air Show. In fact, it was the 40th anniversary air show of Patria Aguila. It featured the largest gathering of jet aerobatic teams seen at any air show since 2018. An absolutely packed flying display that ran for around about 7 hours, 5 national jet aerobatic teams included, and most notably, of course, Patria Aguila themselves. It was their last ever performance flying jets. But we're going to look now at Spain's other display team, Patria Aspa, flying the EC-120 Colibri, 5 of them to be specific. They had the honour of closing the show at IRA 25, and it is a team that is really quite unique on the European airshow circuit. Let's take a look at this excerpt from our newly released programme from IRA 25. 5 more helicopters closed the flying programme. HE-25s, or EC-120B Colibris, from 782 Squadron at Amarilla. This is the unit that provides basic rotary training for the Spanish Air and Space Force. The EC-120 is a French-Chinese joint project, with the first prototype flying in 1995. The Spanish Air Force operates 15 EC-120s, all of which are part of 782 Squadron. They were delivered in 2000 and 2001. Then, in 2003, instructors at the squadron formed a display team in their spare time, Patria Aspa, and that tradition continues to this day. With the light starting to fade, Patria Asper wrapped up the approximately 7 hours of flying displays which took place at Aero 25, a show that took on real historical significance and will be long remembered by those who attended. That was a very memorable show indeed, and you can find an hours-long highlights programme over at watch.plainstv.com. Now, if you joined some of our broadcasts earlier in the year, you might have heard me mentioning on several occasions a forthcoming programme about the air show in Pardubice in the Czech Republic. That is indeed still coming up. We'd hoped to release it in August. It's been ever so slightly delayed, and so as an interim measure we released an extra programme in August on our streaming service, and that was a roughly hour-long recap of the old Buckingham Air Show in the UK, up in Norfolk. And that went out on our streaming service around about 10 days ago, if I remember correctly. Here's a little look at that fantastic event. As you can see, some very interesting aircraft at that show. Fred Acker's CA-13B Sabre. We had the last UK appearance of the Douglas R4D 6S ready for duty at the end of its European tour, and you can see all of the highlights over on watch.plainstv.com. Now, if you're not familiar with our streaming service, I have mentioned it several times at this stage, it is a streaming service that is all about air shows and aviation. And you can find on that service all of our live broadcasts, including some that are not put out for free on YouTube, but also a back catalogue of programmes stretching all the way back to the late 1980s. We've got several hundred titles available at the moment, and there are more programmes in our archive that are yet to be digitised, and we do slowly add them to the service as well. So here is a little glimpse at what you'll find in the Plains TV archive at the moment.
From the Supermarine Spitfires of yesteryear to the Typhoons of today, the Royal Air Force, often operating alongside its NATO allies or coalition forces, is committed to providing frontline protection from aerial threats, securing your skies and making us safe, past, present and future.
If you would like to find out more and indeed subscribe to our streaming service, head over to watch.plainstv.com to see the subscription packages. We have monthly subscriptions available, and you can cancel at any time. We very much hope that you'll join us over on our streaming service. There's a huge amount of content that is coming up over the next few months, and one of those new programmes that is coming up soon will be from the Duxford Battle of Britain Air Show that occurred at the Imperial War Museum Duxford a few days ago. I was there with my camera while the rest of the team were up in Scotland doing the live broadcast of the International Air Show Festival of Flight, so we haven't had a chance to show much of the material that I filmed at Duxford just yet, but seeing as we still have around about 15 minutes to go before the start of the flying display here in Jersey, there is, I think, time to take a look at some of that Duxford material, and this was the grand finale of the Duxford Battle of the Ripon Airshow 2025. They call it the Big Wing, and I believe it was their biggest big wing ever. A grand total of 23 Spitfires and Hurricanes. What a sight. That was a very memorable event indeed, and a programme all about it will be coming to the Plains TV streaming service later in the year, probably sometime in the autumn. But I think now it's time to focus a little bit more on the present, because the flying display here at the Jersey International Air Display is 10 minutes away.
Ditch your 9 to 5 for an island that's 9 by 5 miles of historical delights. From World War II bunkers to Lahouk B, which is older than the pyramids. Wait, that can't be right. No, it is. And that's only the start of our story. Jersey, where sea meets soul. Come and pay us a visit.
Jersey is the sunniest place in the British Isles, but it took a tech genius called Martin and his weather drones to prove it. Because Martin and his fleet of drones predicted the weather accurately, Gemma was able to make her BA-257 flight from London to Jersey in 40 minutes flat, so she could make the meeting of a lifetime at the digital Jersey hub, where she met a private investor who agreed to fund her startup idea, then took one look out the window and ditched the boardroom for a paddleboard session with Aaron, the online beauty mogul who'd taken the day off to pick up his niece from school and buy her a Jersey ice cream, the girl genius who's currently developing an ice cream delivery app in her after-school coding class, taught by technology lecturer Ben, who at this very moment was having his brain picked on WhatsApp by Peter, a political minister who was on his way back from the States Assembly, just as Gemma breezed past to share the good news with her influencer friend Becky, who was watching Will, the founder of Race Nation, shave seconds from his personal best, before stepping on shore to meet them for sundowners and pizza on a balmy summer's eve without a single cloud in the sky, just as Martin and his weather drones had predicted. Welcome to the most connected island on Earth, where connections run deeper than data.
We do so much love coming here to Jersey. A great place to visit in any circumstances, but particularly so during the air display. They always put on a great show here, and what I'll do now, since we're just a few minutes away from the start of the flying programme, is I will run through what we are expecting to see, with the action starting at 17 minutes past. The flying display will begin with the OV-10B Bronco, followed by the Turbo Firecat. Then we have the Harvard Mark IV, Rich Goodwin in his Pitts S2SE, the jet Pitts, but sans jets on this occasion. Plain Sailing's PBY-5A Catalina, the P-51D Mustang, a very rare appearance from the Anson Mark I, an aircraft that is newly arrived in European skies from its previous home in New Zealand. Then we have a combined display of the Boomerang and the Yak-3, the Junkers 52, the RAF Typhoon and the Red Arrows closing the show at 4:30. We are, of course, very grateful to all those who have supported the Jersey International Air Display, the many sponsors and locals who have contributed to the event. A great many companies here on Jersey that have helped to make this show a success. And of course also to the members of the public who have so often donated to the show. It couldn't possibly go ahead without public donations, and if you ever have attended this event, or if you wish to do so in the future, then there is a QR code which you can scan, which will get on the screen in just a few minutes' time. That will just a few seconds' time. We'll get that will take you to the donations page. You can also head to the Jersey Air Display website to find out more about how to make a donation and how that will support the future of the event. We'll now as we count down the final minutes towards for the start of the flying display, I think it's time for me to hand over to your flying display commentator, and it is, as usual, Ben Donnell.
A very good afternoon to everyone gathered here around St Aubyn's Bay for the 2025 Jersey International Air Display, and now to all of you watching around the world, wherever that may be, on Plains TV. Hope you're having a good day, and it's about to get exciting here in Jersey skies once again for this great September spectacular. One of those air shows where you look at the flying programme for it and you think that could only be Jersey. There's no other aircraft with the sort of mix of participants that we see at this event. Adam Landau from Plains TV is joining me here at the commentary position during the day. Adam, it's all looking pretty good, isn't it?
It certainly is. The weather is exceeding expectations, I think it's fair to say. The wind, which is straight down the runway over at Jersey Airport, has also died down a bit since this morning, and certainly since yesterday.
It has, indeed. And yes, as I was saying earlier, there is the risk of further showers passing through, but we expect them to be fairly fast-moving on this stiff breeze. Just in case you aren't aware, there have been some changes to the programme in the past 24 hours. The Royal Air Force Falcons parachute display team, perhaps as you'd expect, the wind is quite significantly out of limits for them. We've also, due to the weather here and back in the UK, lost, as the last few withdrawals from the lineup, the Lockheed 12 Electra Junior, the Aero Superbatics Wing Walkers, and the Royal Navy Wildcat helicopter, but nonetheless a great programme lined up for you. Now, as ever, the aircraft operating out of Jersey Airport, which is everything except the Typhoon and the Red Arrows, both of which items will be operating out of Bournemouth Airport today, will be following a regular clockwise route around the island. Once they have gone out of Jersey Airport, they'll head clockwise up to the north of the island, and there are different holding points around the island that they pass through and, depending on the traffic in front of them, hold at prior to their display slot. So routing around the northeastern corner, then round to Seymour Tower, and if you look out now to the left, you can see the first of the aircraft coming around Seymour Tower through the prime hold into our display area. And it's a very appropriate aeroplane with which to start the show, because it's been at pretty much every Jersey air display since this show went international in 1997. Our great friends from the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse at Montélimar in France with the North American Rockwell OV-10B Bronco. And a really good first chance there to see the incredibly distinctive layout of this aircraft. There's absolutely nothing you could ever mistake for the Bronco, which was conceived for the American military in the 1960s, in fact for a requirement for all three of the American armed services, the US Air Force, Navy and Army. That requirement was for what they called a light armed reconnaissance aircraft, and as you can see, it is fully aerobatic. This is a type that can withstand G-forces of between +8 and -3. It had to have 2 crew, it had to be able to fly off aircraft carriers. That wasn't something they did very much with the Bronco. Top speed of 350 miles an hour, carried 2,400 pounds of cargo, or 6 paratroopers and stretchers. And the real fortes of this aircraft were all on display when it went to war in Vietnam. The US Marine Corps took it to war there for the first time, flying it as an observation and forward air control aircraft. They direct strikes by fast jets, by AC-47 gunships, and by ground artillery. They could provide damage assessment after American strikes, and they acted as light strike aircraft of their own with machine guns and rockets. The US Navy used them in Vietnam as well as light attack, interdiction and naval fire support aircraft, and Broncos of the Marine Corps dropped paratroops. So all in all, a tremendous all-rounder, and it carried some very advanced kit for its day in the late 1960s. For example, part of the bread and butter of modern-day strike aircraft is laser target marking equipment. This you might think of as a relatively recent innovation, for example, much used in the 1991 Gulf War, but Broncos were using it in Vietnam in the 60s. Those missions over Southeast Asia by these aircraft, in spite of their excellent performances, as we can see, their incredible manoeuvrability, were very hazardous, and 81 OV-10s were lost during the whole of the Vietnam War. By the time of Operation Desert Storm in the Gulf in 1991, the Bronco was decidedly outdated. The US Air Force decided not to use them there for exactly that reason. The US Marine Corps, though, did so, and the aircraft carried on performing well, and it's very much the sort of aircraft that's come back into vogue more recently. I say that because in places like Afghanistan in particular, there's been a need, it's been felt, for counterinsurgency and light attack aircraft, and two very much upgraded Broncos were actually evaluated by the American military for use in Afghanistan. They deployed there as recently as 2016. They performed excellently, though it was decided in the end not to buy them and to adopt more modern types instead. Very wide range of performance. Here we see the Bronco coming past us at the slow.
We're in that grey area.
This one's in the colours of a US Marine Corps Bronco used during Operation Desert Storm. As I say, it comes to us from France, but it's actually used by the West German Luftwaffe as a target tug. That was another of the roles you could put this very versatile aeroplane to. And this OV-10B model distinguished by the big glass dome in the rear fuselage in place of the rear cargo door. They were first delivered to the Luftwaffe in the late 1960s, and they went on being used until they were replaced by the Pilatus PC-9 single turboprop in the late 1990s. It was bought by the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse at Montélimar in southern France in 1991. It was initially a static display exhibit. They then decided to restore it to fly, and it took to the air again in 1996. And having done that, it was one of the first aeroplanes to be booked at the first Jersey International Air Display in 1997. And it's the main ambassador of that flying museum at Montélimar, operating throughout Europe, even going as far afield as Marrakesh. Such a distinctive sound from the two Garrett T76 turboprop engines of about 715 shaft horsepower each. And a lovely sight there as it banks around the bay around the rear of Elizabeth Castle. A Bronco display, even though we're only seeing some of its capability being demonstrated, of just what an outstanding machine this was for the sort of low-level, close support work these aircraft undertook above the battlefield. A very, very spirited wing rock, heralding the final pass by the OV-10B Bronco, flown for us today by Jean-Luc Berry, known as Chuck, from the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse at Montélimar. In fact, our second aircraft on the programme comes from that same French operator, and there is a link between the two because one of the other users of the Bronco, as I said, it was a very versatile aeroplane, was CAL FIRE, the California Department of Forestry. It flew the Bronco as a fire spotter, rather harking back to its days as a Ford Air controller in Vietnam. And we're going to see another type of aircraft that was used by CAL FIRE as the next item, although we see it in its guise as flown by France's Sécurité Civile. And this is one of my absolute favourite types of historic aircraft, and here it is, like the Bronco, running in from the left. This is the Conair Turbo Firecat from the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse, and it's the first time this particular Turbo Firecat has flown at a display in the British Isles. Here it comes. lovely machine, and we'll see something of the manoeuvrability of this aircraft during this sequence as well. Not aerobatic like the Bronco, but nonetheless very agile, just the sort of aircraft you need, in short, for the low-level firefighting role. But this is based on a design conceived for other purposes, namely the Grumman S-2F Tracker, anti-submarine warfare aircraft for the United States Navy.
Yes, and when this was introduced with the US Navy as an anti-submarine warfare aircraft, it was a bit of a revolution, because up until the Tracker was introduced, anti-submarine missions generally involved two aircraft working as a pair, one that would be used to detect the submarines and the other that would launch the attack against it. The Tracker was really the first aircraft to combine both roles into a single aeroplane.
Yes, it was the first hunter-killer airborne anti-submarine warfare platform, as you say. And one of the important points about the Tracker when it first appeared was it was radial engined rather than turboprop. A pair of Wright R1820 Cyclone radials went into service with the US Navy as far back as February 1954. It could carry torpedoes or a nuclear depth charge in its weapons bay. It also had underwing hard points for rockets, depth chargers and torpedoes. And the original Tracker had a long magnetic anomaly detector, or MAD boom, extending from the rear fuselage.
And that in itself a fascinating piece of kit used to detect very, very small changes in the Earth's magnetic field that might be caused by the presence of a nearby submarine.
Yeah, and like the Bronco, this is a type that served in Vietnam. 8 US Navy squadrons flew them there, and they received export orders from 14 countries. And the Argentine Navy operates the last Trackers still in military service, those two converted to turboprop power. Now, when the Tracker was retired from military service, it became very popular as an aerial firefighting aircraft, combating wildfires. Those efforts were spearheaded in Canada and soon got a lot of interest in the USA. There were several different firefighting Tracker conversion programs, one of which was by an air tanker operator called Conair in British Columbia. It bought its first 2 Trackers in 1975, and the conversion was a very major one to fit it out for the firefighting role. They basically gutted the fuselage and fitted a removable rectangular tank for the retardant of about 725 imperial gallons. And to discharge that water, they added 4 doors along the underside of the fuselage. That created what Conair called the Firecat, and it was ordered by the Sécurité Civile in France, who wanted a fast air tanker to operate alongside their Canadair CL-215 amphibians. 32 piston-engine Trackers were converted by Conair, 14 of them went to France, and at one stage in France they would make the initial attack with retardant on 70% of all fires that required aerial intervention. When the piston-engine spares situation began to deteriorate, Conair offered this turbo Firecat with the Pratt & Whitney Canada PT6A turboprop engines, and this is the result.
Ben, what a beautiful result it is.
Yeah.
The turbine engines actually, I think, aesthetically improved the looks of the aircraft, but it was a conversion that was so sympathetic to the lines of the Tracker.
I would agree. Yes, a lot of people would think it was heresy to say a turboprop was better than a round engine, but in this case, yeah, I agree. It's a very, very elegant machine, and let's not forget the sort of flying that the firebomber crews, many of you will have seen footage on the news from various countries of firebombing aircraft in action, but the sort of work these aircraft would undertake, very challenging and potentially often risky. It was largely done for the Sécurité Civile by ex-French military pilots, and these aircraft were absolutely the first responders with the Canadair amphibians lines, following up as and when required. So much faster than the radial-engined Firecat this, and that was good for firefighting because, of course, it enabled much quicker response times. Even so, the day of these aircraft came to an end in early 2020 when the Sécurité Civile retired the last of them at their base at Nîmes. They've retired them in favour of an aircraft, as we see a bank pretty much up to 90 degrees there, showing you the agility of this aeroplane. They've retired them in favour of an aircraft type much seen in Jersey in the past, the Bombardier Q400. But thankfully 2 of them have been preserved in airworthy condition. We had the other one over from Alençon with us last year, and this one from the Musée Européen de l'Aviation de Chasse at Montélimar. It returned to flight on the 9th of September last year, so almost exactly a year ago today, and it was flown for us today by a former Sécurité Civile pilot, Laurent Michelet, the utterly wonderful Conair Turbo Firecat. I think we both agree, Adam, a lovely, lovely display aircraft. It's got a lot of presence, it's very manoeuvrable.
Yeah, some of those steep banks are very eye-catching indeed, and great lines as we were talking about earlier. It's very pretty. I love watching turbo Firecats fly.
Yeah, indeed. They used to enjoy seeing them on the odd occasion at shows in France where the Sécurité Civile used to put on demonstrations with them. This one is actually capable of dropping water, though unfortunately it's not possible for it to do so during the display today, but who knows, hopefully we might see that in future years here. And this was the first time this one has displayed at a show in the British Isles, so another first for Jersey. And yes, a tremendously charismatic aircraft. We never got to see when they were in service, and I know requests were made, but they were always too busy being on call for firefighting operations.
Yes, of course, aircraft with a very serious role, and it's lovely to be able to enjoy them in a different capacity as civilian operated, well, I was going to use the word warbirds, I'm not sure if that quite applies, but civilian operated vintage aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely tremendous. And the group at Montélimar, just the most fantastic operators. I think they've supporters of this show. I think they've been to this show more than any other operator that we've ever had since the show went international back in '97.
The supporters of the Jersey International Air Display this year is one of the main visitor attractions here on the island. The Jersey War Tunnels, a really tremendous, absolutely fascinating place to visit that tells the story of Jersey's wartime past. Well, speaking of the wartime past, coming up very shortly, we have an aircraft of the Second World War era, and that will be the Harvard Mark IV from Navy Wings.
Okay, so look out high and to the left. Our next aircraft is running in, and it's another American classic. We've got several of these on the programme today. This time, though, we're looking out for one of the most outstanding training aircraft there's ever been, and that is no exaggeration. From the Navy Wings Heritage Flight at Royal Naval Air Station Yeovilton in Somerset, this is the Canadian Car and Foundry Harvard 4. By the propeller tips going supersonic, that very, very distinctive acoustic effect heralding the arrival of the Harvard. Originally, of course, not built by Canadian Car and Foundry, that's the company that made this one, but it was a North American product, known to the Americans as the T6 or AT6 Texan, and to the British and Commonwealth forces as the Harvard. A 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engine, and this was the advanced trainer for so many wartime pilots. And it really was an excellent advanced trainer. With 600 horsepower, it's pretty powerful, and it's got some handling characteristics particularly suited to the transition that the students would hopefully make towards fighters if they were streamed in that direction. But it's very much an aircraft that could bite the unwary trainee. And it's also an aircraft that, like the types that they would hopefully progress to, has certain challenges when it comes to ground handling, being a tailwheel equipped aircraft, and it needs to be flown accurately, especially in terms of its speed in the circuit and while manoeuvring.
And even more so on a windy day like today then.
Yes, definitely. When you add in the fact that it could be fitted with practice bombs or rockets and indeed guns for armament training, all of that adds up to this being one of the most legendary training aircraft there has ever been. Flown huge numbers during wartime in particular. The RAF began taking delivery of the Harvard as early as 1938, and the service flying training schools that were equipped with Harvards on the UK mainland gradually found the training programs being disrupted by enemy action. hazardous places around the then Empire, the likes of Canada and Rhodesia in particular, under what were known as the Empire and later the British Commonwealth air training plans, and enormous numbers of trainees passed through their facilities. And for the pilot trainees in particular, this would almost inevitably have seen them flying aircraft like this. In the United States, but also by companies like Canadian Car and Foundry, which built this one, and Nordyne in Canada. And they carried on serving for years after World War II as well. They've seen lots of frontline service too. They were used as forward air control aircraft in the Korean War. The RAF flew them as light attack aircraft during the confrontation in Malaya against communist gangs. The French flew them during their colonial war in Algeria. And the last Harvard on British military charge wasn't retired until 2016, supporting test activities with Kinetic at Boscombe Down.
This is one of the many Harvards that has participated in combat operations with the Portuguese Air Force in southern Africa, counter-insurgency missions.
Yeah, what's now Mozambique, until the country became independent in 1975. Built after the war, this one, for the West German Luftwaffe, until it was handed over to the Portuguese. And it's also, Adam, one of those that's still really in demand for doing the job it was intended for.
Exactly. So many of the Warbird display pilots that we enjoy on the airshow circuit nowadays trained to fly the heavy fighters like Spitfires and Mustangs by flying Harvards.
We'll see an example of that later on in the programme. Navy Wing's Heritage Flight at Yeovilton uses this for just that tail dragger training purpose. And it's also a very good display aeroplane in its own right. And we should say, of course, yes, it's got 600 horsepower, and that for a trainer is pretty potent, but for giving a low-level aerobatic display, it's quite underpowered, especially given that it's quite a heavy aeroplane. And so you need to maintain your energy to put on a really good sequence like that. I thought that was a superb example of a low-level Harvard Aeros display from Mark Jameson. Keeping track of the participation lists for this show, you'll have known that we were hoping to see the Fairy Swordfish from Navy Wings as well for the second year running. Unfortunately, as you might have heard earlier when we were talking to their chief pilot, Andy Davis, it's got a bit of an engine snag at the moment, so the Swordfish unfortunately not able to join us for what would again have been one of the starring roles in the programme, but of course technical issues taking priority to solve, and so the Swordfish not with us today, but I hope you'll agree that was a lovely showing from the Harvard. I mentioned the QR code that you can find on the front of your souvenir programme to donate towards the air display here. Well, we've also got a QR code on the live stream being provided by Plains TV. So you see the QR code coming up on screen. That's how you can donate from home to make sure that this wonderful air display keeps flying for a good many years to come.
Yeah, you can do. We're all set up here, just give us an idea, but I think the other one as well, out so far from the P-30. Next one is renting the case, so here's the first one.
We make no excuse for showing a large part of this wonderfully choreographed routine.
A little glimpse there into the Plains TV archive, an example of some of the programmes that you'll find on our streaming service. But now back to the live action, and very shortly we're expecting to see Rich Goodwin in the jet pits.
So the first really high-octane aerobatic display of the show from one of the top performers in Britain and Europe coming up. We're going to see it, we believe, in slightly different form to normal today. I'm just waiting for that aircraft to run in.
Well, the aircraft that is out to our right hand side, setting up to start its display, is referred to as the jet pits because normally it's fitted with two Lynx turbojet engines on either side of the nose. Those jets, we believe, aren't fitted today, but that's not all bad news, because without those heavy jets the aircraft might not have quite as much power, but it's actually slightly more manoeuvrable in other ways, particularly in terms of what we call flick rolls, about which more later. That's one of Rich Goodwin's specialities. So this will still be a very aggressive display indeed, so much so that Rich has been quite literally ratchet strapped into the cockpit. It is about to put the smoke on. There it is as he comes by in a knife edge pass from the right. Rich Goodwin at the controls, a former Tornado pilot from the Royal Air Force, later turned airline pilot. He's been flying competition aerobatics for around 30 years and for the past decade or so he's been one of the leading airshow aerobatic pilots in the UK. Now flying this extraordinary, one-of-a-kind aircraft of which pretty much every component has been customised or built from scratch. And that includes the rudder. Watch now as Rich uses that enormous, enlarged, custom-made rudder to perform a flat inverted turn through roughly 270 degrees. That just one of the many alterations to this aircraft that give it performance simply unmatched on the airshow circuit. That's just the start. The aeroplane also has a modified fuselage, new wings with enlarged ailerons for improved roll rate, and also an upgraded Lycoming piston engine. G-forces in this display, anything up to 6G. That means everything on and in Rich's body is weighing 6 times more than normal. So his arms will be feeling heavy, hard to move, the blood will be draining towards his feet, starving the brain of oxygen. And he'll be pulling some rather strange facial expressions as well, as the G-force even pulls on the skin on his face. Manoeuvre, Rich is going to demonstrate the rudder authority of this aircraft once again by attempting to cartwheel twice around his left wingtip. A couple of rolls on the way up as the speed bleeds away. Now watch for the rudder to kick in the double hammerhead. There's the first of the spins, and there's the second. See a bit of a contrast here. You just witnessed a very large loop, albeit with some flick rolls on the top, but we're about to see, I suspect, a very small loop. There it is, the enormous custom-made elevator on this aircraft, allowing Rich to pull back on the stick and perform what he calls a micro loop. And now Rich is going to try and show us that he doesn't need the 2 jet engines in order to make this aircraft hover. He's about to try and bring the pits to a near total stop in mid-air.
We should say, Adam, that the development of this aircraft, this hugely modified Pitts S2S Special, was not the work of a moment, was it? It took literally years to gain the necessary approvals and to make all the modifications.
A 4-year test and evaluation process, an engineering challenge, but also a challenge in terms of getting the approvals and permissions required as well, of course. now is pushing negative G for an inverted pass down the show line. And pushing even harder now. Negative G, so incredibly uncomfortable. It feels like your eyeballs are about to burst, and in the most severe cases it causes your vision to turn red due to the blood pooling in the eyes and brain. So Rich climbing for height there, and the smoke now goes off. He's going to take a moment to cool his engine, to take a little breather as he gets set up for the next part of the show. So he's shortly going to dive in towards us and perform a sequence of rolls, various different kinds of rolls, for a manoeuvre that he calls the Tower of Power. The smoke comes on, he dives in towards us with aileron rolls initially, and watch for him to pull up into the vertical very shortly. And it's an aileron roll to the right, now some inside snap rolls to the right, and now the longest torque roll that he can possibly muster. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Goodwin and the Tower of Power. A fantastic torque roll there, using the torque of the propeller to keep the aircraft rotating, even when it has zero airspeed and the ailerons have no effect. Ben, it's hard to believe that this aircraft stems from a more than 80-year-old design.
Yes, Curtis Pitts it was who came up with his eponymous aerobatic biplane as far back as 1944. It absolutely stunned the world when it began being seen early post-war aviation events, because nothing like this had ever been witnessed hitherto. And there's such a rich legacy of Pitt's performances both in display and competition aerobatic terms, but, well, there's no exponent quite like Rich.
Yeah, certainly is not. It was arguably in the 60s, 70s and 80s that the Pitts had its heyday. In the 60s, Curtis began selling plans and kits, allowing people to build their own Pitts specials at home, and very quickly after that it became the dominant aerobatic aircraft in the Western world. In 1972, a Pitts S1 was flown to victory at the World Aerobatic Championships with American pilot Charlie Hillard at the controls, and that was the first time a Western-designed aircraft had won the FAI World Aerobatic Championship title. Yes, it had really been the preserve of the Eastern Bloc and would become so again. Today the Pitts Special remains in production, both as a home-built kit plane but also as a completed factory-built aircraft, and although it's been surpassed at the very highest levels of competition aerobatics by modern composite monoplanes, it remains one of the most popular aerobatic aircraft in the world. Here he comes for another of these fantastic knife-edge passes, a bit of a trademark of his. Fascinating to see him working the curved display line there, managing to match the curve of the bay even during that knife edge pass. It's just a testament to his skill, isn't it?
Yeah, as is coping very, very well with this stiff wind. And we should also, of course, mention the main sponsor, Aerobatics.
Yes, hugely complex and costly business. building and operating an aircraft like this, and it would not be possible without aerobites support.
It would not. And we also would like to mention that that display by Rich Goodwin today is dedicated by Kevin to Diana for her help and kindness in a very sad chapter of his life, and he says, Diana, he thanks you with all his heart. Rich Goodwin there with the jet pits with no jets. The next aeroplane on display, another of those Jersey favourites, along with the new aircraft we like to bring into the show. There's always a core of regular aircraft like the Bronco, like Rich Goodwin indeed, that we enjoy bringing you most years. And this is certainly true of the next one, a real presence on the display circuit, and an aeroplane you might have seen flying around the island a couple of days ago when it gave flights to a number of supporters of the show. And there it is, off again to the left. Another of those shapes that's completely unmistakable. A very, very elegant one, and an aeroplane that is a very significant sight in our skies this year, following the recent passing of the last wartime Victoria Cross recipient, Flying Officer John Cruikshank of the RAF Volunteer Reserve, who won that decoration for his exploits at the controls of an aeroplane such as this. Here comes the consolidated PBY-5A Catalina from Plain Sailing, based at Duxford in Cambridgeshire. This is an amphibious version of the Catalina, fitted with a tricycle wheeled undercarriage, but it was initially designed as a pure flying boat. This is a design that was created for the US Navy in the 1930s. Even then, it was becoming clear that there was likely to be a conflict in future in the Pacific, and the US Navy felt it needed a new patrol bomber aircraft to help combat the Japanese threat, and this was the winning aeroplane in a competition against another manufacturer, Douglas. The patrol bomber version, the PBY, followed on from the initial prototype, and the prototype of the patrol bomber version achieved a new distance record of more than 3,400 miles on its maiden flight. This was an aeroplane that, while it first appeared in patrol aircraft prototype form in 1935, was very, very advanced for its time. Now we see it flying in back towards us with the wingtip floats down. Chance as the aircraft flies past there to appreciate some of the features of this design that was so important to its capability. That huge wing incorporates a lot of fuel tank engines, what's known as a wet wing, and that leads to a considerable weight saving because it means the lines of the aircraft are that much cleaner and thus the drag is reduced. In any case, it's a pretty streamlined aeroplane. And also, with some of those wingtip floats in action there, rather than being fixed, they're retractable. Again, another low drag measure. Now, this aircraft was used in pretty much every theatre of World War II, starting out in the Pacific, then on into the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. By the time America entered World War II, with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, 16 US Navy squadrons of PBYs were operational, and they undertook some of the war's greatest maritime aviation exploits. And with the RAF, that in particular meant in the Battle of the Atlantic, those years-long crucial engagements for control of the high seas, and thus ensuring that Britain remained supplied by way of the Atlantic convoys with both military material and supplies for the civilian population. There was what was known as the U-boat gap in the middle of the Atlantic, an area in which German submarines were able to roam almost at will, supported by the deadly Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor maritime strike aircraft, and out of range of all existing land-based aeroplanes, with a huge threat resulting to those supply convoys. The Catalina was one of the aircraft that closed the Atlantic gap. Another was another consolidated design, the B-24 Liberator, which was used in its long-range form by Coastal Command in significant numbers as well. And the first big success for the Catalina in RAF service was in May 1941 in connection with the hunt for the German battleship Bismarck. The ship was located off the French port of Brest by a Catalina flying from Northern Ireland, and in spite of the Bismarck's own fire, that Catalina and another one shadowed it until naval vessels were back in the vicinity. One of those vessels was HMS Ark Royal, and its Fairey Swordfish biplanes, one of which, as I said earlier, we were hoping to see in today's display, but been denied by technical problems, delivered a crucial blow that enabled the Bismarck to be finished off by gunfire from the Royal Navy's home fleet. In fact, the last sinking of a U-boat in the whole of the Battle of the Atlantic was by an RAF Catalina. It was northeast of Sulham Voe in the Shetland Islands, just one day before VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, the 8th of May 1945. On the 7th, this Catalina from number 210 Squadron was active in the vicinity of U-boat U-320, which was actually on its first operational patrol, and the U-boat ended up being abandoned on VE Day itself, with all the crew surviving. This one used to be operated in its post-military days, because it started off with the Royal Canadian Air Force, by France's Protection Civile, forerunner of the Sécurité Civile, with which the turbo Firecat we saw earlier in the show used to operate as well. Back with the floats down now for another pass. By the now 40-year-old operator plane sailing from Duxford in Cambridgeshire. It's been with them since 2004, and it's owned by a group of shareholders, many of whom are pilots. Not all. There are also people who just want to be associated with the continued operation of this aeroplane, which is now only the sole airworthy Catalina flying in Europe. There used to be one in France and another in the Netherlands. They both have been sold to customers in North America, so this is the last PBY able to record these types of magnificent wartime exploits in European skies, and it gets around those skies a lot. Once it's finished here, it's off to a show in Belgium. It'll be appearing at over the weekend. This year, course, we've marked the 80th anniversary of VE Day. In the Netherlands in August, there were major commemorations of the 80th anniversary of victory over Japan, VJ Day. Went to take part in them, saluting the operations by Dutch Catalinas in the Far East, and it overflew the Indies Monument in The Hague to salute all the Dutch forces who were lost in the Netherlands East Indies theatre, where PBY's, the Royal Netherlands Navy, served in large numbers. And that was the final pass of the PBY-5A Catalina from plain sailing. One of the two pilots today, Philip Pettit, and if you were listening before the show, you'll have heard from the other, John Harmsworth, retired Cathay Pacific Boeing 747 captain, but born and raised in Jersey. He learned to fly with Jersey Aero Club. He later flew from the airport in commercial service with Intra Airways on the DC-3 and with Aurigny with the Britain-Norman Trilander before he went off to join Cathay. And he loves coming back here every year as one of the pilots on that beautiful Catalina. I know you didn't, but...
Making only its second ever appearance at a UK airshow is the Lockheed F-117A Nighthawk, so-called stealth fighter.
It's going to pitch up into an on-crowd bunt. And here comes
as the Catalina heads
flares.
back to Jersey Airport. Our next display is going to be another classic American wartime aeroplane, but this time one of the greatest American fighters of the Second World War. An aeroplane with very significant British influence, because while the prototype North American NA-73 flew before the end of 1940, it was a design that was far from perfected. It was a very advanced fighter design, one indeed produced to serve a British requirement, a British purchasing commission in New York City out there during 1940 to try and seek out extra fighter supplies for the Royal Air Force, went to visit North American Aviation. They felt that a brand new design could fit the bill admirably. The result was the aeroplane that's now running in from our left, operated by Northwind. This is the North American P-51D Mustang. North American NA-73 prototype was turned out by the company based in Dallas, Texas, as a priority program given the urgency attached to the RAF's requirement, and thus made ready in double quick time. But while the airframe was very definitely pretty much right from the start, the choice of power plant rather restricted it. It was initially equipped with the Allison V1710 engine, which was also being used to power the Curtiss P-40 Hawk family of fighters. Now that was a good power plant for use at low level, but it was lacking at higher altitudes, and the Allison engine Mustangs also rather lacked range. Be enhanced by installing the Rolls-Royce Merlin. Rolls-Royce, duly in 1942, turned out the first experimental Merlin engine Mustang, which was test flown from the company's flight test base at Hucknall. The result was an aeroplane absolutely transformed. Rolls-Royce itself was too busy to build Merlins for Mustang production alongside those for Spitfires, Lancasters, Mosquitoes and myriad other types. So Merlin manufacturing was begun by Packard, the American automobile manufacturer. Packard Merlins also, amongst other types, equipped certain marks of Merlin engine Spitfire. And so it was that the full potential of North America's very slippery, very high-performance airframe was realised by the Merlin-engined Mustang Marks. Once again, another piece of British influence on this American design. B-17s and B-24s over occupied and newly liberated Europe were made that much more practical and that much more survivable by aircraft like this. Well, it really needs to be said, because I think felt over time that the Allison engine Mustang was in all respects a disappointing aeroplane. But the Allison Mustang variants were very, very effective low-level ground attack and tactical reconnaissance aircraft, serving, for example, with the RAF right the way through the D-Day period in 1944, so they still had their role as well. But this, the Merlin engine Mustang, very much the variant of the design that is most recognisable and most known today.
At the Inglewood plant in California. The US Army Air Force shipped to the UK thereafter and taken on charge by the 504th Fighter Squadron of the 339th Fighter Group stationed at Valmere in Cambridgeshire. Very quickly, the airframe was allocated to Captain Bradford Stephen, who named it Marinelle. Being shot down during a dive bombing mission over France.
We've seen a good few Mustangs in Jersey International Air Displays over the years. We've never had this one before.
Indeed, very few British air shows have had this one in recent years, because it spent a period based in Italy, and it's only returned to the UK in the last few months.
Yeah, indeed. It was restored to flight by Maurice Hammond at Eye in Suffolk. He operated it for a good few years on the circuit. We never saw it here in that time. Then, as you say, Adam, it went off to Italy, where a guy called Claudio Contri, I think it was, operated it for several years. But now part of the North Wind stable, now based at North Weald in Essex. Describing, Adam, aircraft's wartime identity.
The Mustang's use in combat went far beyond the Second World War, and when conflict began brewing in Korea, the Mustang, then known as the F-51, was still very much in service. Not so much used as fighters by that point, but fitted with cameras or with racks for bombs and rockets, used for photo reconnaissance or ground attack.
Yeah, and also used in Korea was the P-82 twin Mustang.
So
variant,
it was.
particularly in the night fighter role. And they carried on being flown in combat, aircraft like this, for a very long while. In fact, the last war to see piston-on-piston aircraft aerial combats took place in 1969 between Honduras and El Salvador, known as the 100 Hours War, or more famously the Soccer or Football War. And that involved Mustangs taking on Corsairs. Both sides had Corsairs. The Salvadorans had Mustangs, known as the Soccer or Football War because it followed clashes that erupted in the wake of a World Cup qualifying match between the two countries. The aircraft coming in for its final pass, so time for you to show your appreciation for a lovely sweeping display around the bay of the North American P-51D Mustang named Marinelle. By Isabel Rutland, who we've never seen flying in Jersey before. earlier when we saw the Harvard how we'd be seeing someone who's taken that classic route that wartime pilots took from the Harvard onto types like the Mustang. Isabel has done just that with the Harvard that she operates. She displayed that for a while, then acquired this P-51 and is now, as we see, flying a tremendous aplomb.
Another little link, Ben, that I'd like to pick up on with the display with the Harvard that we saw earlier. You mentioned, as we saw the Harvard flying, the sound it was creating with the propellers. Fascinating noise that is not directly generated by the engine itself. We heard another fascinating noise on that final pass by the Mustang, not directly generated by the engine itself, in the form of the Mustang whistle. Such an evocative sound as it flew past us.
Yes, that very distinctive howl that you only really hear at certain points when the aircraft is flying in front of you, because, as you say, it's not generated by the engine itself, though there are various theories as to exactly how it's generated. The most common one being the passage of air above the gun ports, but not being technical, I wouldn't really like to speculate.
No, all I know is I've seen a Mustang once where the gun ports were allegedly covered up, but it still whistled.
Interesting. Well, from one outstanding aeroplane to another. In fact, I think the aircraft we're about to see now must be considered one of the finest vintage aeroplanes now flying in Europe, and it's not been flying in Europe for that long because this is a restoration that was undertaken over many, many years in New Zealand. Its owner over there regrettably decided to sell the aeroplane, but his and New Zealand's loss is very much Europe's gain. And we're now going to see only the second British Isles display by this incredible aircraft. Now, the Avro Anson is a type we've seen in Jersey before. The Air Atlantique Classic Flight, who used to contribute regularly to Jersey International Air Displays, used to fly one of these aircraft. One year, it even did touchdowns on the beach as part of its display. Well, the next aircraft is an Anson, but it's a far earlier one than we used to see in the Jersey show. And it's a very different performer because while it outwardly mainly looks the same, though there are certain differences, and I think this earlier mark is, if anything, a slightly more elegant specimen than the later ones that we're more familiar with. The level of performance of the aircraft we're about to see is very, very different, but it recalls in particular how the Anson, which was a tremendously versatile light transport, used a lot as a ferry aircraft by the Air Transport Auxiliary, and particularly as a crew trainer for crews of multi-engined aircraft during wartime, also, upon the outbreak of World War II, had certain frontline roles to play, and that is represented by the utterly magnificent aircraft running in slowly from the left now. A newcomer to Jersey for 2025 from an organisation called RAF Station Czechoslovakia. This is the Avro Anson 1, all the way from Podhorany Uronova in the Czech Republic. Power from two Armstrong Siddeley Cheetah 9 engines of 350 horsepower each. The later Ansons have fully 70 horsepower more per engine than this one, yet this was an aircraft with which the RAF went to war in 1939.
Some 800 Ansons in RAF service when war broke out. Quite a lot of them operating with Coastal Command. That had been the original intended role for the Anson in Royal Air Force service, but it did come to be decided that the Anson wasn't really adequate for that role. Had a cruise speed of less than 140 knots, endurance of 4 hours. That wasn't really enough to patrol the full extent of the North Sea, and it wasn't that heavily armed either. A pair of small 100-pound bombs.
But in spite of that lack of performance, This aircraft didn't just go to Coastal Command early in its RAF service, which began in 1936 with Coastal Command, but to Bomber Command as well as an interim measure. There were 26 squadrons of Anson 1s like this in RAF service when war broke out. And one of the engagements in which Anson 1s were used is quite incredible. Aircraft of number 500 Squadron RAF were flying from Detling near the south coast of England. That unit had made the RAF's first attack on a U-boat of World War II with one of these aircraft just 2 days after war broke out. Then in May 1940 it was flying coastal patrols with these already obsolete aeroplanes, covering the Dunkirk the Dunkirk beaches during the evacuation. And on the 1st of June 1940, a section of 3 of these aircraft was being led by Pilot Officer Pete Peters over the beaches, the aim being to reassure the remaining British Expeditionary Force troops who were awaiting evacuation. The Ansons were pounced upon by 9 Messerschmitt Bf-109 single-seat fighters of the Luftwaffe. Pete Peters slowed his Anson down, the Messerschmitts overshot, and 2 of the Messerschmitts were shot down by the Ansons with their front guns, and Peters went on to be awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross.
And during that engagement, Ben, Peters was flying his Anson sometimes as low as 50 feet above the surface of the water. Imagine, looking at what we're seeing now, what that would have appeared like.
Imagine going to war in this aircraft. And the colour scheme on this one reflects another very early war action. It's painted as a number 206 Squadron Coastal Command Anson, which was operating from Bircham Newton in Norfolk just 2 days after war broke out in September 39. The Anson it represents was shot down over the sea by a Luftwaffe Heinkel HE-115 float plane, and it became the first RAF combat loss of the whole war. The crew of the Heinkel spotted the survivors from the Anson in the water and landed to try and pick them up. And just one of them, Pilot Officer L.H. Edwards, survived, and he became the first RAF prisoner of war of World War II. This aircraft, the one we're seeing here, was built at the Avro plant at Eden, today's Leeds Bradford Airport, in 1943. It was supplied to the Royal Australian Air Force, served in the training role as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, then went into all sorts of civilian hands. It even won a pylon air race at Moorabbin in January 1971, another aspect of Anson history, along with going to war in them, that rather beggars belief. It spent 12 years on display at the Wangaratta Airworld Museum before Bill Reid bought it. He restored it on his farm in Wakefield on New Zealand's South Island, and it made its first flight from Nelson Airport in New Zealand in July 2012. When he put it up for sale, it was bought last year by RAF Station Czechoslovakia, based at Podhorany Uronova, south-east of Prague. They've also got some de Havilland Tiger Moths and a Miles Magister in their lovely collection of British Second World War aeroplanes.
This comfortably the crowning jewel of their fleet, and you refer to it as a restoration. That almost undersells it, because this isn't just restored, but it's restored to exactly how it would have been on a specific mission, down to having the appropriate maps and charts in the cockpit, even the appropriate pencils.
Yes, and I don't know whether they're doing it today, but the flight crew regularly fly in the period appropriate uniforms as well. It was reassembled and reflown by Fast Aero at Brascat in Belgium at the end of May this year, and it's a very appropriate aircraft to have with the RAF stationed Czechoslovakia fleet, because many Czechoslovak pilots and aircrew trained on Ansons, some of them flew it on anti-submarine patrols with RAF Coastal Command. That is a gorgeous aeroplane. Watching it turn on a sixpence over the bay in front of us was a true pleasure. Our thanks to Richard Santos and Jan Karabets, the crew of the Avro Anson 1.
This time it's not going to pass by us, is it? No, I see that, yeah, it's coming straight forward. Where do you put the sound?
Now, before we carry on with the next display item, a small tribute to pay, if we may, and one that I know will be very meaningful to the significant Polish community here in the island of Jersey, because all of us in the air display community have been very saddened in recent weeks by the loss of Major Maciej Krakowian, call sign Slab, the Polish Air Force's F-16 Fighting Falcon demo pilot from their Tiger demo team practicing for an event at Radom in Poland. He was a very well-liked figure on the European display community, and all of us here at the Jersey International Air Display pay tribute to Slab today. And our particular thanks to Richard Santos from RAF Station Czechoslovakia for getting the Anson to us at all. He has based it, it came over for a show at Duxford last Sunday. He's then based it at Lydd in Kent for the week after that in order to make sure the aircraft was hangared. Obviously the strong winds and rain prevented him from getting here until today, but he flew it in this morning and he's heading over for another show in Belgium later before taking it back to the Czech Republic. That is some effort. Well, now we're continuing with the warbird theme of the display today with two very, very international fighters. We're not going to be seeing them flying together, in fact, today, as we have done on occasions here in the past. They're going to be giving us individual displays, but my goodness, if ever you wanted to see two warbird fighters of character, I think you've come to the right place with the two that we are next to see. And the first of them is running in now, and it's put smoke on already to herald its presence. And this is another aircraft that, when it came here 10 years ago for the first time, was making its British Isles debut here in Jersey. This is the Commonwealth CA-13 Boomerang. Now, if ever a Second World War fighter had an interesting gestation, this is it. When war with Japan broke out, Australia naturally found itself very much on the front line. But the Royal Australian Air Force of the time didn't have a proper fighter aircraft. Now, bear in mind that the first Japanese attacks on Allied forces were not at Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941. against American forces, of course. They actually took place a few hours earlier on the same day in Malaya, and then the port city of Rabaul in Papua New Guinea was bombed in January 1942. So Australian forces defending those territories really needed a fighter aircraft. The last line of defence was provided by an aeroplane called the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation Wirraway. That's often referred to as a version of the Harvard that we saw earlier. Well, there are some similarities. Technically, it's actually based on a version of one of the Harvard's forerunners, which I know is probably an unnecessary level of detail, but it is an important one. That design, the Wirraway, provided the basis for what Australia called an emergency fighter. So too did the Pratt & Whitney Twin Wasp engine, which was being built under licence in Australia for Bristol Beauforts for the Air Force. And this Australian fighter was designed by an Austrian Jew called Fred David, or Friedrich David to use his original name, who'd worked for Heinkel in Germany and Aichi in Japan, and those were just two of his former employers. He proposed this fighter design and headed up the project. He fled to Australia when war broke out. But because he was considered by the authorities to be an enemy alien, he was required to report to them every week at a police station. Nevertheless, just 22 weeks after his first sketched concept and 14 weeks after the design hit the drawing board, the first flight was carried out in May 1942.
Incredibly, for a nation that had very little experience designing and building aircraft, the Royal Australian Air Force felt compelled to place the initial order for 105 aircraft several months before the aircraft actually took to the air for the first time, which, as you say, happened in May 1942. And the initial flights went, on the whole, rather well. They proved the aircraft was a pretty capable performer, especially in the low-level environment.
They did, and given this what might sound rather unpromising development in double quick time, with the designer having to report to the police, and as you say, a country that had never built a fighter of its own before, its handling was good, its performance was pretty good, excellent rate of climb, better than the likes of the Mark I Spitfire, better even than the Focke-Wulf FW-190, one of its contemporaries, although of course there were never to be any combat between German aircraft and boomerangs.
First ones entered service in 1942. They began to equip fighter squadrons from April 1943. And they were committed to the home defence role. So they don't have an awful lot in the way of combat history because Japanese forces rarely reached the Japanese mainland, but they were able to disrupt Japanese bombing raids on quite a few occasions, and that's more or less how things continue to play out. Flights of boomerangs were successful in terms of the threat they posed, but perhaps not in the damage they inflicted.
Yes, the top speed was a bit low and high altitude performance wasn't great. But as you say, it was very good in the low level role, and that was where it excelled, because in September 1943, the Royal Australian Air Force decided no longer to use it as a point air defender, and instead as an army cooperation aircraft to make the best use of those qualities. Generally fly in pairs. They could seek out concentrations of Japanese forces. They could spot for artillery units. They could provide close air support, and they could strafe targets themselves. quite often they'd fly in conjunction with Vought and Goodyear Corsairs of the Royal New Zealand Air Force, marking targets for them using smoke bombs. And this very rugged and agile aircraft was ideal for this kind of work.
A great similarity, of course, to the Bronco that we saw at the start of the flying programme. Very much the same role.
Yes, indeed. And the Boomerang units, numbers 4 and 5 squadrons of the Royal Australian Air Force, flew them a lot in New Guinea, the Solomon Islands and Borneo, were much valued by Allied commanders that they flew on behalf of, and the New Zealand Corsair pilots they often flew alongside. So while no Boomerang ever shot down an enemy aircraft, its intended role, it still had a big part to play. This one was built in California in the late 1980s on the basis of a T6 airframe, but it does incorporate quite a few original Boomerang parts. There are some structural differences to one of the originals. Since 2014, it's been owned by a Dutchman, Remco Cyber, who keeps it now at Antwerp in Belgium, and he's kept the markings of number 83 Squadron, who flew Boomerangs on home defence missions in World War II.
And while there are a few Boomerangs airworthy in Australia, this is the only one airworthy in the Northern Hemisphere. And in fact, when it came to Jersey, as you were describing all those years ago for the air display, it was the first time that a Boomerang had ever visited the British Isles.
Yes, indeed. Interestingly, this one is slightly longer than the originals, but it's still a very, very short and stubby fighter. As I say, one of tremendous character, I think. Remco Cyber, then, with his Commonwealth Boomerang. Nice to have him back in Jersey this year, and we're shortly to see his regular colleague with the other aircraft of what they call the Warbird display team, today flying separately in another slightly unsung Allied fighter of the Second World War. Well, we have a moment, a welcome once again to all of you watching around the world on Plains TV. No matter where you are, hope you're having a great day and enjoying our coverage of the 2025 Jersey International Air Display. And thank you also to our many sponsors, without whom putting on a display of this scale simply wouldn't be possible. It is, of course, a free not-for-profit event, so we're reliant on sponsors and, of course, your contributions to help keep it going and keeping it accessible for everyone here in the island to enjoy. Our thanks to ATF Fuels, who are a supporting partner of the display, and they'll be title sponsor for the Red Arrows display with which we'll be closing the show. Also a supporting partner, Van Mossel Jackson's automotive products and services, provided over 77 years by them. Dolan Hotels, with their 4-star luxury establishments in St Brellard's Bay and St Aubyn's Bay, and they've provided accommodation for several of the display acts taking part in the show this year. Also to RBC Wealth Management, Randall's, the International Stock Exchange, the Grand Jersey Hotel and Spa, the Radisson Blu Waterfront Hotel, Jersey War Tunnels, very proud to partner with the show this year. Likewise, Bevismark Shipping. Thank you to the very generous act of giving by Tim and Mary Clode towards the show this year. Also support in kind from several other hotels, the Westhill County Hotel, Marina Metro, the Bow Site, Seymour Hotels, the Hotel Ambassador, and also more broadly to the Jersey Hospitality Association. Thanks to Geo Marine, and to the many of you who have supported the event via the event's sports giving page, and in order that we can carry on seeing many more great display days like this, use the QR code on the front of your souvenir programme. You can buy them at all sorts of places around the site. It's an excellent programme, costs £7, great souvenir of the day. Go to the QR code on the front. You can do your bit to help keep this show flying. And there's also a code on the inside back page for you to take a survey where you can offer your views on today's show. And for those of you watching on Plains TV, there's also been the QR code shown on the live stream today many times, via which you at home can do your bit too. And while we're on the subject of thank yous, the organisers are very grateful to the Government of Jersey, in particular the Minister of Economic Development, the Chief Minister and all the supporting departments, because their support really has once again been crucial in putting on this 2025 display. And that goes also to Ports of Jersey, who make a major contribution every year too. And now straight on with our next display item, the second half of this Warbird display team. And another very potent radial engine machine in from the left, the Yakovlev Yak-3 UTI PW.
And you described the Yak-3 as perhaps being an under-recognised aircraft. I would wager a great many of the spectators here might not have heard of it before, but my goodness, it was such a potent fighter. When it made its combat debut in 1944, its effectiveness on the battlefield was immediate. On its first major aerial engagement on the 16th of June of that year, a group of 18 Yak-3s attacked a larger formation of German fighters and won with a kill-to-loss ratio of 15 to 1.
Yes, this is a very hot ship, the Yak-3, and pretty short-ranged as well, because of course there was a trade-off between outright performance and range. But as you say, very effective in combat. A great deal's been made over the years that there were supposedly orders from the Luftwaffe to its fighter pilots ordering them not to engage Yaks like this in lower-level dogfights because of the likelihood of being shot down. I've never actually, even reading quite a big book on the Yak fighter family, been able to ascertain whether that is true, but it is certainly the sort of thing that could very well be true. Such was this aircraft's outright performance at low altitudes.
And not just effective against German aircraft, but a real menace for German ground troops and vehicles as well. It would be armed typically with a 20mm cannon, 150 rounds, a pair of 13mm machine guns, and they could be deployed very effectively indeed in the air-to-ground role.
There's one unit that's more famous than any other that flew the Yak-3, and that's the Normandie-Niemen unit. It was actually a Free French rather than a Soviet unit. Régiment de Chasse 3 was its official designation. And it had been set up after the German invasion of the Soviet Union to increase fraternal ties between the Free French under General Charles de Gaulle and the Soviets. It started out being named Normandie after that region of France, but changed to Normandie-Niemen after the unit played a big role in liberating areas around the Niemen River in what was then the Soviet Union. And it flew the Yak-7 and Yak-9 before it converted to the Yak-3.
A great many famous pilots flew with that squadron. Among them, Marcel Albert, he flew Yak-3s with that squadron, and he considered this aircraft to be a better fighter than either the P-51 Mustang or the Spitfire.
Yeah, there's very interesting newsreel footage of them bringing their Soviet fighters, all of these French flown of course, back to France after World War II in Europe had finished, and it shows very vividly the high landing speed of the Yak-3. Again, one of those attributes that could be a little challenging with this aeroplane.
A of course, the appearance of having a very high landing speed accentuated by its pretty small size. It was among the smallest and lightest fighters of its era.
Yeah, this is an interesting example because it's fitted with an American radial engine rather than the original inline Klimov engine. It's a Pratt & Whitney R1830 of 1200 horsepower. Gives it quite a different appearance, much more similar to the Yak 11 trainer, which was developed on the basis of the Yak 3, and this is also a two-seat version to boot.
Yes, and there were a number of radial engine twin-seat Yak 3s that were built, a small number of them, which served as the missing link, if you like, between the Yak 3 fighter and the Yak 11 twin-seat trainer.
And this aircraft has resulted from one of many programs to produce new build Yak 3s in the wake of the Cold War, and they've proved really popular aeroplanes on the worldwide warbird circuit. Indeed, the Yakovlev Design Bureau itself, which originally conceived and built this aeroplane type, was responsible for one of those runs. This aircraft is based on a two-seat Yak 11 trainer, which was sold to Capella Aviation in France. It then went to the Avioane company in Romania for conversion into this Pratt & Whitney powered Yak 3 UTI PW.
And the reason for it having that American engine rather than a Shvetsov, one of the radial Russian engines that would have been available and used in Yak 11s as they came off the production line, is quite simply because it's so much easier and more economical to run and to find the spare parts for.
In fact, this one has now got French markings on it to reflect that Franco-Soviet link from the Normandie-Niemen regiment, though in fact the aircraft of that regiment carried on wearing the regular Soviet Red Star markings.
So Phil, about the too far away from
A very nice aeroplane this, based at Antwerp in Belgium. It was based in the Netherlands for some time, still on the Russian register until bureaucratic issues intervened, so it's now on the French register, which makes things rather easier. And the aeroplane's been to Jersey a few times, often in collaboration with the Boomerang. The two of them regularly put on quite a dynamic dogfight and opposition display. And that finishes the display by Rick van der Graaf with his Yak 3.
I was not being sarcastic when I said, what about too far away from it? You know, if somebody is outside of this, you've got to be in their opinion.
Okay, well, the next aircraft on display, and the last of our historic aeroplanes for the day, is now lumbering its way in from the left. And it's another type that we're delighted to see back here in the skies of Jersey after a long absence. And it comes to us from one of the greatest centres of historic aviation anywhere in Europe, namely La Ferté-Alais, southwest of Paris, at which gorgeous hilltop grass airfield are based countless exquisite vintage aeroplanes, of which this is one from the Amical Jean-Baptiste Salis. This is the Junkers U-52 3M. Why 3M in the name? Well, it stands for Dreimotoriger, or three-engined. The design team at Hugo Junker's eponymous firm, led by Ernst Sindel, started conceiving a new transport aircraft in 1928. It was to be suitable for passengers and cargo. It was to be as affordable as possible to purchase and maintain. It was to be rugged and to have low takeoff and landing speed, so it could operate out of the widest possible variety of sites, yet it still had to have good performance and altitude capability. And the result, the configuration, followed on from previous Junkers transports, being a low-wing monoplane with a corrugated skin of a material called duralumin to enhance its strength. The result was a single-engine aircraft to begin with, the U-52, with engines also built by Junkers, and that made its first flight 95 years ago today, on the 11th of September 1930. And the prototype of that aeroplane made long demonstration flights all around Europe, but there was a demand for more power and performance, and that was to be fulfilled with this three-engine version. And it became far more popular, able to carry 17 passengers. The main engine was the BMW 132, which was the German licensed manufactured development of the American Pratt & Whitney Hornet. And like the single-engine version, it could use wheel, float or ski undercarriages. And of course, its heyday was in the 1930s. The German national carrier Lufthansa operated about 230 of these aeroplanes. Its main hub of activity was the famous old city centre airport in Berlin, Tempelhof. And this aircraft made it possible for Lufthansa to open all sorts of new European routes thanks to its performance. For example, for the first time they could fly over the Alps between Berlin and Rome. After one of these aircraft flew between Berlin and China in 1937, which included a passage over the Himalayas, the Eurasian Aviation Corporation was established as a Sino-German enterprise, and its U-52s served locations like Peking, Canton, Shanghai and Hong Kong. It was very popular too out in South America. Now, when war broke out, Lufthansa handed some of its U-52s over to the Luftwaffe, but it kept others so it could maintain a route network during wartime, right to the end of the European war. And as the situation got increasingly desperate for Germany, some of its flights became significantly overloaded. For example, flying out of Gdansk, then Danzig, in early 1945, U-52s, rather than flying with 17 passengers, would take somewhere in the region of 50 people as they tried to flee the advancing Red Army. Now, the demand from Nazi leaders meant that military versions were developed in the 1930s. In fact, that was one of the reasons why Hugo Junkers himself was removed from his own company, because he had no desire to see the aircraft being used for such purposes. Hitler used it as a personal transport. There was a big VIP fleet of these aeroplanes stationed at Tempelhof. And in military transport guise, these aircraft were able to fly 18 fully equipped troops. They acted as airdrop platforms, casualty evacuation aircraft, and so much more. They were also used as an interim bomber during the Spanish Civil War and the early part of World War II. Look at it crabbing along as it recaptures the display line, showing those excellent slow flying characteristics, remarkable for such a big aeroplane. Lovely sound from, on this aircraft, 3 775 horsepower Enmasa Beta B4 engines, which are Spanish license-built Wright Cyclones. As German forces advanced in the early part of World War II, this Junkers transport design was a key part of their strategy, with the huge paratroop assaults, for example, as were undertaken in the May 1940 attack on the Netherlands, and they would have been repeated had Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion of the United Kingdom, gone ahead. As it was, they carried on in similar roles in the Balkans, in Crete, in North Africa. The invasion of Crete in May 1941 was conducted with an unprecedented number of airborne troops, more than 22,500 deployed by U-52s. But these slow-flying aircraft were very vulnerable, and that was illustrated in April 1943 above all. That was the occasion of the Palm Sunday massacre. 22 U-52s that were involved in resupplying Axis forces flying between Tunisia and Italy were shot down that day, and 35 more force landed. In fact, more than 220 U-52s were believed to have been shot down by the Soviets in the concluding part of the Battle of Stalingrad as well. So this was no longer really an aeroplane that was up to the job, but they carried on flying after the war with all sorts of operators. In fact, the last weren't retired by the Swiss Air Force until 1982. This is an interesting one. The fuselage was German-built, one of 30 fuselages supplied to CASA in Spain to kickstart licensed production of what it called the CASA 352. And the wings, and as I said, the engines, were all Spanish manufactured. Served this aeroplane for many years with the Spanish Air Force, latterly as a paratroop trainer. It was retired in the early 70s and sold off, went to a couple of operators in Britain, and then in 1990 it was sold to the Amicale Jean-Baptiste Salis, one of the main associations of historic aircraft based at La Ferté-Alais. It was ferried there. The restoration got underway, headed by Robert Roger. It lasted 25,000 plus working hours and 13 years, flew again in April 2003. Oh, and what a sight that is. And flying this aircraft is a huge team effort. The control forces in the U-52 are very high, so the pilot sometimes has to have both his hands on the big control wheel, aided by the co-pilot. The flight engineer, meanwhile, is looking after the power settings, using, of course, 3 engine levers as dictated by what the pilot wants. And I talked earlier about how the Catalina is now the only airworthy example in Europe. This is now the only airworthy U-52 in Europe, because others have either been lost or grounded. And so, again, a hugely important part of European aviation heritage. Much supported, this aircraft, by Airbus over the years, who contributed greatly to its restoration as well. And they're heading off back towards Noirmont Point and round the island to land at the airport. I think that was a tremendous display from the crew of Robert Villanova and Didier Staras in the Amical Jean-Baptiste Salis Junkers U-52 3M. Thank you, mes amis. But now it's over to the modern-day Royal Air Force for the 2 concluding items of our 2025 Jersey International Air Display, both making really welcome returns to the island. The Red Arrows still due to close the show. We didn't see them last year, of course, because they were overseas. It's been a 4-year absence for our next display act, representative of the modern-day frontline RAF, and I should warn you, of course, it's about to get very noisy, so do take the appropriate ear protection that you think you might need for the display that we're going to see in a few moments' time. The aircraft we're shortly to see comes to us from number 29 Squadron at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire, the operational conversion unit for this type in RAF service. And it's in the hands of a new display pilot for the 2025 season, coming towards the end of a very busy year of commitments. And this, of course, also at a time when the type itself is very much in frontline operation on international commitments for the Royal Air Force and coalition operations. And this alongside the major commitment of holding the UK's Quick Reaction Alert facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in defence of UK airspace. And not just UK airspace, but also mounting regular operational deployments to the Baltic and Icelandic air policing missions. And there have been multiple deployments to Eastern European parts since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. To give you an example of the sort of level of activity, in just 6 days from early June this year, RAF Typhoons flew 6 enhanced air policing scrambles out of their operating base at Malbork in Poland against all manner of Russian Air Force and Russian Navy assets. Along with this, these aircraft are still deployed on Operation Shader, the UK commitment to tackle the activities of Daesh, or the so-called Islamic State, in the Middle East. This is an extremely busy force, but nonetheless they have made a tremendous contribution to the 2025 UK Airshow season, and it's a great joy to have it back with us in Jersey this year. And rather than running in, as is more normal, from the left-hand end, it's going to be a crowd rear arrival in from behind us to enter the display area today. Beginning his run in now from number 29 Squadron, Royal Air Force, we have Squadron Leader Nathan Scheuer with the Eurofighter Typhoon FGR-4. So, pulling up into the vertical, and then back in towards us into a double corkscrew roll. Now you'll notice that the Typhoon is flying to a slightly different display line to that which we've seen most of the display aircraft adopt this afternoon. That because the display doesn't easily fit into the confines of the bay. But nonetheless, we feel the force of the two Eurojet EJ200 turbofan engines in full afterburner. As Nathan pulls up into a loop, apexing at around 4,000 feet. He's got a tremendous view of you there as he brings the aircraft back down to just 500 feet. Those burners glowing brightly as Nathan puts the aircraft into a barrel roll, describing the outline of the inside of a barrel lying on its side in the sky. And as he positions out to the left, he's then going to be running through an amazing 1,890 degrees, performing 5 aileron rolls before pulling 9G as he breaks away at some 600 miles an hour. Nathan's a flying instructor on number 29 Squadron. He joined the RAF aged 18, and he holds a bit of history within the service because he was the last newly trained pilot for the Tornado GR4 strike aircraft force before that aeroplane was retired. Climbing away as he accelerates past Elizabeth Castle. Those two EJ200 turbofan engines producing some 20,000 pounds of thrust when afterburner is engaged, which powers the aeroplane to a maximum speed of twice the speed of sound, Mach 2.
Well, now, Ben, we're going to see the aircraft pushing negative G in an outside turn. And observe the fuel venting from the tip of the tail. That's because there's a transfer line built into the aircraft to allow air to escape from the tanks during aerial refueling, but during negative G manoeuvres a small amount of fuel will leak out.
And there briefly onto the knife edge before going into an inverted pass, and there he is using more negative G, or experiencing more negative G I should say, as he pushes the aircraft up, minus 3G, and topping out there at about 3,500 feet.
Ben, it's worth saying that while the pilot will be wearing a G-suit doesn't really do anything to counter the effect of negative G. It's reasonably good for positive G, but does basically nothing in the negative G environment.
Now accelerating to just under 700 miles an hour at about 100 feet, or 200 feet I think here at this venue. And a 9G breakaway as the engines are pulled back to idle. And this is getting ready to set up for the slow speed pass.
And this really a type of manoeuvre that was made possible with the advent of fly-by-wire technology and what's called relaxed static stability. The very latest jet fighters like this one, designed to be intentionally unstable to the point that they cannot be controlled by a human alone. The advanced computer software is used to interpret the pilot's inputs on the stick and pedals and translate those inputs into control surface movements.
And the digital fly-by-wire system on the Typhoon also provides for what's known as carefree handling, which means the pilot can't take the aircraft out of its envelope. You might have seen the small foreplanes on the forward fuselage of the aircraft. Those and the so-called flaperons on the wings give pitch control to the pilot. Those flaperons also afford them roll control, and yaw control comes from the rudder. And in the cockpit, Nathan has got a fully glass cockpit, as it's known, 3 multifunction head-down displays and a wide-angle head-up display. And it's got what's also called HOTAS, hands on throttle and stick, with the key buttons and switches on the stick, so the pilot can carry out vital tasks without taking his or her hands off.
A really good demonstration of the Typhoon's sustained turn performance here, with a maximum rate, minimum radius turn through 360 degrees.
The speed building again, dropping down to the minimum height, engaging afterburner on those EJ200s, powering to some 600 miles an hour. Pulling up and away, a magnificent rolling departure from squadron leader Nathan Scheuer with the RAF Eurofighter Typhoon FGR-4. What a show from Nathan. The Typhoon back in Jersey for the first time since 2021, and it did not disappoint. Well, we only have one item left on the bill for today's Jersey International Air Display. It is, of course, the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, and we are delighted that ATF Fuels, supporting partners of the whole show here, are the title sponsor for the Red Arrows display that we are about to see. They, of course, one of the many sponsors I went through earlier on. And our particular thanks in coming towards the close of today's show, not just to ATF, but also to the International Stock Exchange Private Markets, to Bevismark Shipping, RBC, Geomarine, Dolan Hotels, Van Mossel, and the ports of Jersey, as well as all the government departments, particularly the Minister of Economic Development and the Chief Minister, who have also provided such tremendous support to this show. And if you've been enjoying it, don't forget to use the QR code on the inside back page of the souvenir programme to fill in our survey and the QR code on the front page, or the QR codes around the site, or on the live stream, to make your donations in support of future Jersey International Air displays. We hope you've been having a wonderful day with us, but it is still very far from over. Once again, on the subject of our gratitude towards those who've supported every aspect of the display, that certainly goes to Ports of Jersey once again, and our very special thanks to all the team at Jersey Airport, because of course they have been extremely busy today, not just with their regular commercial activity, which we need to allow to recommence unimpeded by the display at 5 o'clock, but also fitting in the very busy air display movements, including some arrivals before the show today as well. So thanks to the always very professional team over at the airport for all they do in support of this show.
Yes,
seeing as we've got the biggest crowd of the day, I think, out to watch our final display of this 2025 show. Now seems like an opportune time to say thank you to Mike Higgins, the Jersey International Air Display organiser, and the whole of his team, some of whom don't even get to see the show because they're up at the Air Display HQ adjacent to the airport. But what a tremendous job they've done again. As usually, it wouldn't be a Jersey display without the odd challenge, but we've got through it and we're now up to the final item of the day. And to describe this to you, my huge pleasure to hand over to Red 10 Squadron Leader Graham Muscat.
Good afternoon, Jersey. My name is Squadron Leader Graham Muscat, Red 10, Team Supervisor with the Royal Air Force Aerobatics Team. It's the Red Arrows, and it's an absolute pleasure to be back here at Jersey Airshow. I know we missed it in 2024 due to our Canadian tour, but it's great to be back on Jersey to display for you today in 2025. I have the honour of talking you through the display. I'll give you some more information about the shapes that you're seeing, about the Royal Air Force, about the pilots, and of course, I'll get your eyes into the correct piece of sky so you don't miss a single second of the action. An extremely busy weekend, a couple of days. The team have been arriving from Bournemouth, and they've got a high fuel state, so hopefully we'll put on the best show that we can. So please, put your hands together for the 2025 Royal Air Force Aerobatics Team. It's the Red Arrows! Red 1 immediately starts to pull up. We arrive at over 400 miles per hour, trailing our famous red, white and blue. He pulls up, which means that he's starting the show full, and instantly you can see Red 6 and 7 collapsing behind Red 1. 8 and 9 also move inside to form our world famous Diamond 9 in the skies of Jersey. The aircraft now start to descend back towards display height before bringing them around to the right. Red 1 is the team leader for 2025. He's in his second year as team leader. It's Squadron Leader John Bond. Bondi's actually been in the Red Arrows for approximately 6 to 7 years. He's been a team leader in his second year. He's a former Typhoon pilot, former qualified flying instructor on the Tucano, where he was the Tucano display pilot in 2012. Straight away you see Reds 8 and 9 move left and right with all the even numbers on the right, all the odd numbers on the left hand side. To present from the right hand side, the smoke comes on in 9 Arrow.
Fix and brake to finish. That's what Muskie said to us earlier. Exactly.
On the right hand side of Red 1 is Red 2, Flight Lieutenant Rob Thomas. Rob is in his first year on the team. Uniquely, he was taken from training, made straight into an instructor on the Hawk, before then completing his own training and joining the Typhoon Force, where he served on operations over Iraq and Syria with 3 Squadron, and then became an instructor on 29 Squadron, all based at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire. You'll now see the centre section. Looks though it's moved forwards. It's actually the wings of the formation moving rearwards. For one of the widest shapes that we fly in 2025, the smoke comes on from the left in the Swan. Once again, Red 1 pulls them up at over 400 miles per hour, showing the expertise of the pilots looping in formation. Not only that, they now start to change formation. Reds 8 and 9 collapse to change the shape from Swan into Shuttle. The aircraft reaching a height of over 5,500 to 6,000 feet. That speed slowing down from 400 down to only 120 miles per hour. The input on the control column being a lot less responsive. Conversely, the aircraft now speeding up 200, 300, 400 miles per hour before Red 1 brings them around to the left. You now see the wings once again of the formation move a little bit rearwards to form one of the most iconic shapes of aviation, in aviation history. The aircraft continues to come around to the left. The smoke comes on in the Concorde. On the left-hand side of red, right on the centre stem, is Flight Lieutenant Andrew McEwen, Red 3. He is also in his first year on the team. He flew the OV-10B, which is a Harrier variant, while on exchange with the United States Marine Corps. Before then coming back to the UK and joining the world-famous 617 Dam Buster Squadron based at RAF Marham in Norfolk, where he flew the F-35B, the latest 5th generation fighter of the Royal Air Force. You'll now see Reds 2 and 3 move forwards. The rear section make the delta wing shape. You've just seen the aircraft displayed by Flight Lieutenant Nathan Scheuer, because 2025 is the 20th anniversary of the Royal Air Force Typhoon display team. In from the right to celebrate such a milestone, this is Typhoon. At the back of that formation, on the right-hand side, all the way at the rear, is Red 4, Flight Squadron Leader Chris McCann. Chris is working extremely hard. He's having to look through the formation, because we take all our formation references from Red 1 and not necessarily the aircraft that's on the immediate inside. Chris is in his second year at the team, and again, he was taken from training, made straight into an instructor, but this time on the Tucano. Before then also joining 617, the Dam Buster Squadron, but he was flying the Tornado GR4, where he served on operations over Afghanistan, and he also received an Air Force Cross for his service on operations over Afghanistan. The Royal Air Force is synonymous and famous for its operations in the air domain. However, now we have a unique capability in space and cyber. In from the left, representing that space capability, this is Apollo. There are actually 11 pilots in the Red Arrows. Reds 1 through 9 displaying for you today. Myself, Red 10, former Tornado GR4 pilot, former qualified flight instructor on the Hawk T Mark II. And of course we are commanded by Wing Commander Adam Collins, Red 11, former Red 10, former Tornado GR4 pilot. And he also flew the F-111 while on exchange with the Royal Australian Air Force. Reds 8 and 9 now move left and right. Reds 6 and 7 also split in the rear. This is a great opportunity to take a fantastic photograph coming in from the left. This is the colourful and noisy Big Vixen. In that manoeuvre, the aircraft are flying with their air brakes out, a small door at the base of the aeroplane towards the rear. And this has twofold effect. The first effect means the pilots fly with a higher throttle setting, thereby producing a hotter engine gas temperature, making the smoke colours burn a lot more brightly. The second effect is it disturbs the airflow outside the back of the aircraft, and it makes the smoke billow a lot more fuller, and therefore in certain manoeuvres throughout the display, we use this technique to enhance those manoeuvres. I just mentioned the pilots. Of course, the Red Arrows is not just about the pilots. We have a team of over 140 personnel. 120 of them are the engineers, the public relations, the administrators, the logisticians, and they are known as the Blues, due to the colour of their blue flying coveralls. You now see Reds 6 and 7 once again sit in trail on Red 1. Reds 8 and 9 sit even further back on the rest of the formation. For one of the most popular, if not the most popular manoeuvre the Red Arrows fly, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get your cameras ready. From the right-hand side, it's tornado time! 8 and 9, roll goes. Reds 8 and 9 roll around the smoke of the rest of the formation, but watch for that colour change as Red 1 brings them down the line. As the Tornadoes completed, Reds 8 and 9 will now join the rest of the formation. Just to let you know, because the aircraft are operating from Bournemouth, we have to hold a higher fuel state to get back to Bournemouth. So it's likely that Red 1 will decide that we cannot complete the full display, but he'll certainly get through as much of the display as he can for you today in the Jersey Air Show. But you'll see Reds 8 and 9 join once again for our Diamond 9. And this will be your last opportunity to get a picture of us in our world famous Diamond 9 before we start the second half. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, in from the left-hand side, in our Diamond 9, it's the 2025 Red Arrows.
Coming left. Holding
As we go into the second half, we start with the same way as 2025 for this is the 5-4 split. And in the second half, we operate in two distinct sections. Off to the left-hand side, we have Reds 1 through 5, known as Enid, named after Enid Blyton's famous 5. Off to the right-hand side, 6, 7, 8 and 9, known as Hannah, named after squad leader Ray Hannah, one of the first members of the Red Arrows. He's the only team leader to lead the team for 4 consecutive years. He took the team from a 7 to a 9 and formed our world-famous Diamond 9. Enid from the left, Hannah from the right, in the 5-4 cross.
Go on, go.
Keep your eye on Enid to the front. Red 4 sitting behind Red 1 and Red 5 in trail on the rest of the formation. Number 5, roll goes. Number 5 rolls around the smoke and Enid in the twister. Red 5 is Flight Lieutenant Dustin Wales, known as Dusty. Dusty is in his second year in the team, originally from Zimbabwe. He's a former Typhoon pilot, former qualified flying instructor on the Typhoon, and test pilot on the Typhoon, all based at RAF Typhoon in Lincolnshire. As Enid leaves to our front right-hand side, look directly to your front. You're looking for the aircraft of 6, 7, 8 and 9. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get your cameras ready for the Hannah break. Red 6 and 7 to our left-hand side, Red 7 and 9 to our right-hand side. Hannah and the synchro pair are led by the synchro leader, that's Red 6 to our left. That's squad leader Tom Hansford. Tom is in his third and final year on the team. He's a former Typhoon pilot, former qualified weapons instructor on the Typhoon, where he would teach all weapons, technical information and tactics to the entire Typhoon force. And he also is a recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross for his service on operations over Iraq and Syria. Each aircraft will now dive down to approximately 100 feet, a closing speed of over 900 miles per hour. As the aircraft cross in the middle, they'll be crossing at only 30 metres wingtip to wingtip. That's only 100 feet. Each aircraft perform a 4-point aileron roll.
Go.
Pull, go is the call from Red 6 to our right as each aircraft pull up now up to 6G, which means everything about them is now weighing 6 times heavier than what you and I are as we stand on the promenade. They reach a height of over 3,500 feet. They'll be inverted 60 degrees nose down before rolling the correct way up to complete manoeuvre called the Boomerang. as the synchro pair leave to our rear, look directly to your front. You can see Enid running back in, joined by Reds 8 and 9. Once again, a fantastic opportunity to get a fantastic picture of the aircraft as they come towards us with the smoke on. As I said, due to the high fuel state in Bournemouth, we have to cut this show shorter, so please put your hands together for the 2025 Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team. It's the Red Arrows! Red 1 puts his smoke on, he'll gather the rest of the formation and take them back to Bournemouth, where we'll refuel the aeroplane, re-dye the aeroplane and get ourselves ready to transit over to Belgium tomorrow morning, where we're performing at the Sanacol Airshow in Belgium all weekend. If you'd like any more information about the Red Arrows, of course we are all across social media, Instagram, Facebook, RAF Red Arrows. If you want to follow any of the pilots on Instagram, you can follow me, RAF Red 10, and you'll be able to find all the rest of the pilots. Hashtag Red Arrows, any pictures or videos you've got, we'll pick them up and share them across social media. Unfortunately, I can't hang around. I've got a flight to catch back from Jersey Airport to Bristol and then get myself back down to Bournemouth to pick up my jet to go to Belgium with everybody else. As I said, it's been an honour and a pleasure to perform for you today at Jersey. We're sorry that we had to cut it short, but obviously it's better being here to perform, doing something rather than nothing. But on behalf of the Royal Air Force and the Red Arrows, thank you very much. Have a fantastic and safe journey home. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Muskie, and lovely to see the Red Arrows back here in Jersey and closing what has been a really memorable 2025 Jersey International Air Display. Thanks to all the operators and crews, whether in the air or on the ground, who have made this show possible by bringing their aeroplanes to us today. Adam, it's been another really fun Jersey show, hasn't it?
It absolutely has been, despite, I admit it, a sense of pessimism a couple of days ago when I looked at the weather forecast. What a glorious afternoon it has turned out to be, and we've had some very memorable flying.
We've had some absolutely lovely flying from all ends of the spectrum in challenging conditions, and conditions that really did test a lot of the display pilots, and of course, as we were hearing from Muskie, caused us some logistical issues as well, but we've come through it and put on another really good show.
We certainly have.
And that, once again, is thanks in very large part to our sponsors and indeed to you for making your contributions. Don't forget, before you go, to use the QR code on the front of the souvenir programme to make your contribution towards this display, and also to fill in the survey using the QR code on the inside back cover of the programme. Thank you to those organisations who have been supporting partners, sponsors, and provided support in kind to ATF Fuels, who supports the Red Arrows there as title sponsor of their display, Van Mossel Jackson's, Dolan Hotels, RBC Wealth Management, Randall's, the International Stock Exchange, the Grand Hotel and Spa, the Radisson Blue Waterfront Hotel, the Jersey War Tunnels, Bevis Mark Shipping, to Tim and Mary Clode, numerous other hotels and the Jersey Hospitality Association, Geo Marine, and of course the government departments and agencies that have played their part as well. But from us, a particular thank you to Mike Higgins and his team of volunteers who once again have put on one of Europe's best free-to-view air shows. And thanks to the team from Plains TV, Adam Landau, who has been joining me on commentary, and the rest of their team who have provided the live broadcast. Hope all of you watching have enjoyed the show greatly from wherever you may have watched. So, from Adam and from me, Ben Dunnell, all that remains is to say goodbye. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you again at the 2026 Jersey International Air Display. Goodbye from us all.
Well, it has indeed been an absolutely lovely afternoon here in Jersey, but do stick with us on Plains TV for a few minutes longer, because over the next 10 minutes or so we're going to be showing you some of the other things that we are going to be getting up to over the next few weeks. But I would like to start by going back to last weekend. I was at the Duxford Battle of Britain Air Show for filming a programme which will be releasing on Plains TV in the next few months, and one of the absolute highlights of that show was an historic gathering of Hawker Hurricanes, 8 of them flying in formation, which I believe is the biggest Hurricane formation that's been seen anywhere in the world since their days of military operation in the 1950s. Let's take a look at that. So that, a little taste of the action at the Duxford Battle of Britain Air Show a few days ago. Now, coming up next on Plains TV, we have another Airshow live broadcast, and it is a really very good one. We'll be bringing you at least 2 days, possibly 3 days of live action from one of the biggest military air shows in the world. In fact, it's more than just an air show. To call it an air show is underselling it, because as you'll see from the video that we are about to play, the action is not just in the air, it is very much on the ground as well. In a few days' time, Plains TV will be live from NATO Days. Now that was a video from NATO Days 2023, which was the last time that event was held. We are very much looking forward to being back this year. Ben Donnell will once again be providing commentary, and that live broadcast will be available to view free on our YouTube channel and also on our streaming service. One of the big stars, one of the many stars of NATO Days this year is the Turkish stars. It's the first time in many years that we at Plains TV have filmed the Turkish stars. I think 2012 might have been the last occasion when we saw them. This video that we're about to show you is actually from 2011. It's from the Turkish Air Force Centenary Show at Izmir in that year. So let's go back to this clip from the Plains TV archive. Of course, the full programme from Izmir is available to watch on the Plains TV streaming service if you would like to see more of the Turkish stars, or you can join us for our live broadcast from NATO Days in a few days.
Flying 8 supersonic NF-5 aircraft, the Turkish Stars is one of the youngest national display teams, making its debut on June the 18th, 1993. The team aims to present the Turkish Air Force on a national and international platform, and their stunning display means that Airshow Turkey closes on a real and very appropriate high.
Well, I, for one, am very excited to return to NATO days. Next week, it's going to be a tremendous show. As I said, at least 2 days of live broadcasting, very probably 3 because we're expecting to broadcast the Friday practice session live as well. And then looking further ahead into the year, we are also going to be doing a live broadcast from the Duxford flying finale in October. That will be exclusively available on our streaming service. If you want to know more about the streaming service, head to watch.planestv.com and you will be able to see all of the subscription packages that are available. It will give you access to all of our live broadcasts as well as to our back catalogue of airshow programmes stretching all the way back to the 1980s. But I think now it is time for us to say farewell after what has been a tremendous afternoon of flying. Thank you to all of you for watching from our 3-person team here at Jersey. We've had Adrian doing a fantastic job on his own on the main camera. It's so much harder when you don't have anyone else on a secondary camera acting as backup. We've had Andrew as the technical director. We've had me doing a little bit of commentary and audio mixing and jumping on the second camera for the Red Arrows. We very much hope that you've enjoyed the stream. We hope to see you again during the next one. But for now, from the wonderful island of Jersey, it's goodbye.
Here's a fun fact. When the tide's out in Jersey, our island doubles in size. So there's twice as much for you to discover and enjoy. Admittedly, when the tide's in, there's half as much. But you get our point. Jersey, where sea meets soul. Come and pay us a visit.
Jersey is the sunniest place in the British Isles, but it took a tech genius called Martin and his weather drones to prove it. Because Martin and his fleet of drones predicted the weather accurately, Gemma was able to make her BA-257 flight from London to Jersey in 40 minutes flat, so she could make the meeting of a lifetime at the Digital Jersey Hub, where she met a private investor who agreed to fund her startup idea, then took one look out the window and ditched the boardroom for a paddleboard session with Aaron, the online beauty mogul who'd taken the day off to pick up his niece from school and buy her a Jersey ice cream, the girl genius who's currently developing an ice cream delivery app in her after-school coding class, taught by technology lecturer Bet, who at this very moment was having his brain picked on WhatsApp by Peter, a political minister who was on his way back from the States Assembly, just as Gemma breezed past to share the good news with her influencer friend Becky, who was watching Will, the founder of Race Nation, shave seconds from his personal best, before stepping on shore to meet them for sundowners and pizza on a balmy summer's eve without a single cloud in the sky, just as Martin and his weather drones had predicted. Welcome to the most connected island on Earth, where connections run deeper than data.